multipolarity offers new opportunities, and I think it's to the credit of Indian diplomacy and Prime Minister's leadership that we are able to quickly walk in these advantages. Of course, this is a long game. This is a game that will change over a period of time. But if you ask, is India on the ball? The Prime Minister's visits to both the United States and France is ample evidence that we are now well on our way to being among the top countries, both encouraging multipolarity, but also quick to take the opportunities that multipolarity offers.
Hello and welcome to StratNewsGlobal. I'm Nitin Gokhale, and you are on our daily evening program, The Gist. And joining me on this evening's Gist is Ambassador Venkatesh Varma, India's former envoy to Russia and an experienced foreign service officer in the Ministry of External Affairs with long experience in various capacities. Russia, of course, was his last posting, but someone who also does a lot of analysis and commentary on strategic issues and the way the global flux is affecting various nations, including India, in the current context. So welcome to this program, Ambassador, and thank you for your time.
Thank you very much, Nitin. It's both a pleasure and an honor to be on your program.
No, pleasure. So let me, begin by, talking about what has been a whirlwind kind of a tour that Prime Minister Modi and his team have done in the past couple of weeks or maybe 3 weeks. The first trip to the US and now the trip to France, which have been termed variously as breakthrough moments, successful visits, taking the relationships to the next level. But in the context of what's happening around the world for the past year and a half since the Ukraine war began in February 2022, how important are the outcomes of these two visits to begin with? And then we can go ahead and talk about other issues dogging the world, really, of diplomacy and strategic affairs.
Yeah, that's right. Prime Minister visited the United States. He also went to France, and there was a visit to the UAE as well. We also hosted virtually the SCO, and the G20 summit is also coming up. So it's a very active diplomatic calendar. Prime Minister's visits to both the United States and France are building on an excellent bilateral wicket which have been prepared in the past. So, but both visits were very successful in certain common ways, but also in certain different ways. With the United States, I think we are truly now entering into a stage of what is called a global, but also a comprehensive strategic partnership. And we have now started seeing that the United States is willing to do cooperative activities with India, which were a little hesitant in the past. Though the regulatory framework had been put in place, the strategic framework had been put in place. I think Prime Minister's visit, we saw some very important strategic breakthroughs as far as what the United States' willingness to do for India and with relation to India concerned. With relation to France, I think the French visit was an extraordinary visit. It was not just consolidating what we had, but also the vision for 2047. It's unique, actually. It's unique, but also not surprising because we are like distinct cousins on two different continents. France looks for its own space in Europe. We have until now looked for our own space in Asia. We have faced, if not similar, if not identical challenges, but similar challenges. And we have succeeded and there is also a global framework that is coming up. So each of these bilateral relationships have been very significant in the bilateral context. But there is also a very important lesson that everybody is noticing when reference to the Prime Minister's visit to both France and the United States, which is that India is now very successful in exploiting the opportunities that are opening up in a fast-changing international situation and global order, which is moving towards multipolarity. Multipolarity offers new opportunities, and I think it's to the credit of Indian diplomacy and Prime Minister's leadership that we are able to quickly lock in these advantages. Of course, this is a long game. This is a game that will change over a period of time. But if you ask, is India on the ball? The Prime Minister's visits to both the United States and France is ample evidence that we are now well on our way to being among the top countries, both encouraging multipolarity, but also quick to take the opportunities that multipolarity offers.
True. And I think you alluded to the multiple partnerships that India is doing. So, like you mentioned, the Prime Minister stopped over at on his way back from the United States at Egypt in Cairo. And then also from his visit from France on his return leg, he stopped at in Abu Dhabi. Now, in the India-France outcome document or the Vision 2047, they also talk about the Indo-Pacific quite specifically, and also a trilateral cooperation between India, France, and United Arab Emirates, and of course another trilateral with Australia, between India, France, and Australia. So this actually is the new reality. Do you think, given that no single power is able to look at influencing the outcomes in the global order, despite what China might want to think? Even China doesn't have the power and influence to really set the agenda. So in this case, India is in a sweet spot, would you think?
Oh, yes, absolutely. We are. There is with France, there is not only an identity of interest, but there's an identity of approaches. We are both significant powers in our own regions, but we are not defined to our own regions because we have a common understanding that the global framework is absolutely critical for not just our bilateral relationship, a regional engagement, but for the larger framework as a whole. But the Horizon 2047 is, I think, it's quite a remarkable document. Because it has certain key phrases, which of course it's a partnership between equals between India and France. It talks about strategic decision making, independence of strategic decision making. It talks about not the rules-based international order, it talks about the role of international law. So we are a little more classical than the more, I think there is certain strength in being classical powers.
That's right.
It is a menu of cooperation from defense to the Indo-Pacific to strategic space cooperation, and not only the space, but also the economy, people-to-people contacts, education, I mean, the whole area. But what is important in the India-French document is the common vision that comes out. And it is not just India is it's not just a reflection of what India wants, but it is also an evidence of how India is being quoted, how big powers want to engage with India. Because I think the success for multipolarity cannot be left at the mercy of the vagaries of politics amongst the G2. The world is too important. European security is a good example of how both Russia and the United States, NATO by extension, have in a sense not played the their relations well. I mean, the Ukrainian war is an evidence of miscalculations on both sides, and European security has suffered as a result. But it is also having a very destabilizing effect on the overall global situation. So that is good evidence that you cannot leave it to just the big powers themselves. If you want multipolarity, you should step up to the plate, take responsibility, put forward ideas, put forward proposals, frameworks. And I think the opportunity that France and India are looking for, not as bilateral relationship is an extraordinarily good relationship. But in terms of finding opportunities for, I would say, many multilateral or multipolar settings. The United Arab Emirates is extraordinarily important in the Gulf. Egypt, a major Arab country, and you can't think of the Arab world without Egypt. As Egypt comes into its own, we should welcome that because it adds to the vitality of the Arab world. The Arab world has been missing in the international scene for too long. And if Egypt looks to India for partnership, it's an extremely good choice. Similarly, I think France looking for partnerships with Australia and India, and we can look at other partnerships. You see, the key principle of multipolarity which we are implementing in practice is that there is no exclusivity. No country expect exclusivity. No country should say that the bilateral or the multilateral relations are based on exclusivity. Now, France warms up to this idea fairly easily. The big parts, they take a little more time because they are used to exclusive formations in terms of their alliances and partnerships. But I think the significant part of Prime Minister's visit to the United States, I think, is a realization on part of the United States that they cannot treat India as they treat their allies and partners, which they traditionally do. There's a certain format. India is too big. India is too important. India is too independent-minded. We have a mind of our own. So I think the United States is gradually coming to the internal conclusion that they require a completely different set of framework for dealing with India. And I think what they are prepared to do for India, despite all the complexities of the international situation, is evidence of the fact that the United States is moving the right way. You see, the United States took 30 years to get used to the fact that India would have an independent strategic nuclear military program. Finally, they came to that conclusion, which is an extremely good outcome, but it required a lot of effort. So I don't think that good relations between the United States and India, strategic autonomy of India should be held as an obstacle. In fact, if the United States were to embrace India's strategic autonomy, American interests, quite apart from Indian interests or Asian security interests or Indo-Pacific interests, or the balance of power in the Indo-Pacific will be promoted. The policy space for what the United States can do to India will expand exponentially. If there's this meaningless debate on whether strategic autonomy or alliance partnerships or alliances of the past or alliances, these are all. The key thing is the United States interested in India's growth? Right, is so. Is it in the United States' interest? If that is so, the United States willing to lend support to India's developmental needs and for India's security needs in a manner that is mutually beneficial and without expecting exclusivity? I think the evidence to Washington, I think, is evidence of the fact that the United States is slowly moving in this direction, which is a very positive development.
I think so. And I think speaking about realization in Washington, D.C. about India having a mind of its own was little or no reference to India's relationship with Russia. Normally, till 2 years ago, the tendency in the US administration was to say, we would sanction you, there will be cuts imposed on India if you do X, Y, Z with Russia, stop it. And despite the fact that Russia is seen as an aggressor by the United States and most of its establishment, that Russia is to be blamed for what's happening in Ukraine, then they could have easily lectured India on cutting off ties, but that didn't happen. And I think that itself is an evidence. And since you are an old Russia hand, uh, how does India fit in that relationship, India-Russia relationship, into the larger context?
You see, we have all very traditional relations with Russia, and there are some very traditional strengths which other countries can aspire to. But Russia, in a sense, has a lead time of over 6 decades. So it was good that France has started in 1988. The United States is starting now. But they have a long time to go because, the capital investment in the India-Russia relationship in terms of strategic convergence on key geopolitical matters, including the fact that Russia has a fundamental interest in the balance of power in Asia, and they don't want a unipolar Asia. They do want a multipolar world as well. And the fact that they are comfortable with India's growth, they have been very comfortable in sharing the best that they can offer for India's growth. And they see India's growth as adding to their own security. It's not just good for us, it's good for them. I think certain fundamentals are still very valid. There's an extraordinarily good relationship between Prime Minister Modi and President Putin, which is a very strong asset for the relationship. Because in this very turbulent world, as we move along, I think the pulls and pressures on the bilateral relationship have been quite good. So I think the relationship between our leaders adds a sort of. There is a populist sentiment. I think there's been a generational change both in India and Russia since the Soviet period, which is natural. But I think there's still a populist sentiment that we don't mean ill to each other. Of course, Russia is now engaged and is preoccupied, so to speak, with its back to the wall in protecting its peripheries on its western borders, which is the result of the breakdown of mutual accommodation in the geopolitical sense and strategic pressures that they have faced from the United States and NATO in Ukraine. We can argue whether there were lost opportunities for peace, for mutual accommodation, but whatever the fact is that now the war is in its second year, the chances are it looks like that until there is a further evolution of the military situation, neither side is willing to move towards dialogue and a peace settlement. Now, the military situation itself is changing in Russia's favor. Russia is slowly getting the upper hand, but this war has thrown up surprises. So we cannot rule out a lot of outcomes that we had not anticipated. But whatever it is, the prolonged war is having a very negative effect on the international balance of power. And the international balance of power is the following: that Russia is weakened by the war, naturally because of the sanctions, because of the economic and energy restructuring that is taking place in the world. But it is fighting back. The United States is recommitted in Europe. It has gone back into Europe, into NATO in a very big way. NATO itself is expanding with just half the resources. So in a sense, the United States and NATO are overextended. And the country that is which sees this as a golden opportunity for geopolitical expansion is China, because the two other players in the international system. Now, this is a tendency, a trend that is definitely not in our favor. The two big partners that we have, Russia and the United States, are due to their own compulsion and due to definitely miscalculations on both sides, have entered into a phase of confrontation over which there is no easy way out. Now,
Sure.
Prime Minister's message has been very clear. It is not just a message for peace. We've said, the PM said that this is not an era of war, but I think there was strong strategic content in that message, which is to say that war cannot be the solution for such deep-seated problems. There will be no outright winners in this war, and I think we have been we have been proven to. It has also had a bilateral effect on our bilateral relations, our defense ties,
Right.
our banking and financial ties. Um, I think there is need for a readjustment in our India-Russia relationship. Russia will continue to remain important for us, not only because of the fact that a substantial portion of our military equipment is of Soviet or Russian origin. While we do a transition, and we will do a transition over a period of time, I think it's in our interest that our friends and partners, particularly in the West, allow India to do this transition towards greater production, greater Make in India, greater Atmanirbhar Bharat, according to our pace and our objective. So I think you mentioned the CAPSA legislation in the United States. I think it's a very self-defeating legislation, and it is, I think, a measure of the strength of our diplomacy that we actually made the United States see its own self-interest in not applying it to India.
Right.
From the fact that, you can't have a situation where China and the United States have the same objective of wanting to force
Right.
India to weaken its defense relationship with Russia, which is so
Right.
essential for its security needs.
Sure. I think so. So talking about the international balance of power, what is China's game plan now? It's got a peculiar problem on its hand. Its economy is not doing too well. Internally, there are many problems it is facing. Russia and China are close friends, but is China really comfortable in what Russia is doing, or is it also trying to learn lessons from Russia's Ukraine war? Added question to this: how does China deal with an India that is engaged in multipolarity now?
You see, China has had a very good free run for the last 3 decades. And we have to grant it to them that they took full advantage of the very conducive international environment, not only geopolitical stability, but a globalization that they were able to exploit to their advantage. And it's unfortunate that the United States was not able to wake up to these dangers earlier. I mean, it's not that they have now woken up. But the engagement of China with the international economic system in terms of geoeconomics is very, very substantial. And that is something that they have built up over the last 30 years. And that is a leverage that works both ways. The United States is presently restructuring not the geopolitics of engagement with China, as much as restructuring the geoeconomics, especially in sort of high technology and things like that. And they call it, what they call de-risking. But de-risking, to be successful, also needs to do the entire supply chain, so to speak, which is that not only American allies in Asia, which is Japan, South Korea, but European allies need to speak from the same song sheet on this. Their economic interests will need to take a little bit of a cost because this restructuring is not going to be cost-free. The issue is, because of political strategic reasons, what is the cost that countries are willing to pay with respect to restructuring the supply chains from China? Now, the United States, which is a very powerful country, a very rich country, is willing to pay a far more higher price than what their European or their Asian allies are. But this is a work in progress. Now, whether this offers an opportunity for India, of course it does. This is another manifestation of multipolarity, not so much in a geopolitical sense as in a geoeconomic sense. Now, whether we should step up to the plate, I think we should. I think we already have. And
That's right.
take it. But we should take it forward in a manner that our own engagement, economic engagement globally, is not does not spin off into a direction where we have less and less control. So while we have autonomy in decision making on strategic matters, we should also have autonomy in decision making on economic engagement matters. It's not that we should close our doors. In fact, we should open our doors even more. because the next 10 years are going to be critical for India in terms of its economic growth. And international trade engagement will be a very critical part. Technology will be even more critical to engagement for India's growth. Now, how we put together, I think firstly, we need geopolitical stability. Secondly, we need access to the other centers of growth, which is Europe and the United States, more particularly. Thirdly, we need to be part of that broader engagement with China because, finally, as we cannot leave security, international security just to a G2 between the United States and China.
Yes.
We also cannot leave the economic and technological engagement with China. So we should also have a say. If we are to be partners in the economic and technological restructuring, we also have to be stakeholders in that, and we should get benefit. It's going to be a complicated game, but in the last two turns in major economic growth in the world, we were bystanders. This time, at least, we have at least one foot in the door, and we are better positioned than in the past to engage.
I think you put it very well, and I think you couldn't have really concluded in a better manner, because this is where the challenge lies, that how do you seize the moment? How do you seize the opportunity is what the Indian decision makers will have to decide. And like you said, deft diplomacy has been at work, and the Prime Minister's own leadership and his image and his status is contributing heftily to what India has been trying to do or will do in the coming decade. But that's where I think it's fascinating to watch the flux, the uncertainty and promise of a better future to come for everybody. And therefore, I must thank you for simplifying it for our viewers in a manner that is understood, very well understood. So thanks very much for your time, and thanks for your insights.
Thank you very much, Nitin. A great pleasure to be on that.
Pleasure. So viewers, that was Ambassador Venkatesh Varma giving us a very nuanced view of where the world is headed, where it is at present, and what should India expect, and what should India do in coming years to become a power to reckon with, and take our own rightful place in the Committee of Nations. So do keep watching StratNewsGlobal. We'll keep bringing you such interesting conversations. You know where to reach us. Your comments and feedback are always welcome. And our social media handles are there for all of you to see. So do follow them. You will get the updates. And of course, subscribe to our YouTube channel if you're already not a subscriber. And if you're already a subscriber, do keep spreading the word that this is the channel to go to for nuanced and very serious and interesting conversations with people who are experts in their own field. Thank you guys very much for watching. Goodbye.